Right and wrong is a perception of the individual. Therefore, there is no right and wrong. Miri Shabaka, Ursa Ma'atra. And knowledge is infinite. Therefore, evolution is inevitable. Peace.
All right. And that's peace. That's peace. So at this point, what we're going to do, instead of having the panel jump in, we're going to let y'all go back and forth, ask each other some questions, do some and rebuttal, respond, etc. This kind of y'all time to go back and forth and kind of a freestyle thing. Of course, be respectful of each other time, you know, answer the question, respond to the question, etc. And we're gonna start just like we've been starting. Conscious Christian Jerome Green, you started off asking your question, Jamal a response, and then you respond accordingly. I'm gonna hit the timer right now. We're gonna start at 10 minutes, but if y'all still going strong, we'll keep it going. If not, we'll move into the next format. That sound good to y'all?
Yep.
All right, time start when y'all start.
Ready.
All right. My question for you, Jamal, is within the ideology of the Ifa tradition, are there any humanitarian pretensions against slavery? If so, explain.
You saying, are there any humanitarian? What do you mean by that? Like, what are you saying?
When I say humanitarian pretensions, is there anything within the Ifa tradition that could be linked to abolishing any form of slavery?
I would say you yes, because again, you would never see no type of spiritual tradition before slavery. Now, I'm not saying that slavery was not practiced in Africa, but that form of slavery was different. It wasn't the chattel slavery we had here in America. It was more of servitude. So it wasn't really the same as we experienced or saw in America. But slavery, as far as what you're saying, is like something that's chattel, that has oppressed people on all levels.
I didn't say chattel. I was speaking of slavery, period.
Slavery is an institution that has enslaved people and oppressed people. That's what slavery is.
So the type of slavery that was going on in that particular region of Africa wasn't an institution?
That was servitude. Now, let's not romanticize it. There are places in Africa that has sold people into slavery. We're not going to doubt that. That is true. That is documented.
Right.
I would say that in that particular area, it was servitude, not chattel slavery, and it's not the same. We know that there's a difference. So,
But that doesn't necessarily answer my question, though.
I did. You said slavery it was servitude. It was not slavery.
That's not. See, what you tried to do was you attempted to lighten what I meant by slavery by saying it was servitude. That doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I asked you, are there any humanitarian pretensions against slavery in the Ifa tradition?
I answered that. You didn't like the answer. I'm telling you that, of course, slavery would not be something in Ifa tradition that we would celebrate. That doesn't make sense. Why would ancestors who have died for you worship or embellish in slavery? Well, we know slavery is a bad thing.
So, I mean, is that something that is actually within the tenets, or is that something that you're assuming?
It's both. I know that's the tenets. I'm a practitioner of Ifa. And then this logically, you would, again, that's with any, that's like saying the same thing to you. When had Jesus abolished slavery? I never saw it in the Bible. I never see Jesus against slavery. He never came and broke slavery. But you follow Jesus. Has he ever spoken against slavery?
He didn't have to, because in the Bible speaks against slave trading, period. You know what I'm saying? So don't try to flip it. Don't try to flip it on. I'm asking you, what are the humanitarian pretensions against slavery? I'm not asking you to say, oh, well, the Ifa tradition wouldn't condone slavery. I'm asking you, where is it within the tenets of the Ifa tradition that are humanitarian pretensions against slavery?
See, Ifa don't have doctrine and Bibles and stuff that Christianity have. So I can't
tell. That don't have nothing to do with my question. Like, you bringing the Bible and Christianity in it, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, but you're a Christian. So I'm asking you a question.
I'm asking you what your tradition has in regards to humanitarian pretensions against slavery. I'm not talking about Christianity. I'm not talking about the Bible. Just answer the question. If you can't, then just admit that you can't answer the question, bro. We can move on.
You didn't like my answer, bro. And then
it didn't address the question. It made light of what was going on in Africa, and that has nothing to do with my question.
I already admit that there were some people that were sold into slavery by certain African kings. That's documented. We already know that already. However,
basically what you're saying is there were no humanitarian pretensions against slavery because these African kings essentially saw nothing wrong with selling other Africans into slavery.
There are African kings who did not practice Ifa tradition. There are many other African spirituality besides Ifa in Africa before Christianity. So you assume everybody practices the same religion.
It ain't about before Christianity or none of that. I'm asking you specifically, based on your tradition,
other African spirituality in the continent besides Ifa tradition. During that time, who knows who been practicing what? What I'm saying is there was those who were sold to slavery. I can admit that. That's not my issue. You trying to put everyone under the same umbrella. You cannot do that.
Not doing that. I'm asking you specifically about the Ifa tradition. And are there any humanitarian pretensions against slavery? Because you would have to show me historically that there was nobody who was a part of the Ifa tradition that did not facilitate in the slave trade. So if they facilitated in the slave trade, then essentially there's no humanitarian pretensions against slavery in that particular tradition.
And so you're trying to prove what at this point by mentioning this?
I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm asking you to answer the question.
So what are you trying to prove, Jerome? You asked the question. What are you trying to prove to me?
I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm asking you a question. I didn't make a statement. I asked
answer my question. I answered the question. You ain't like the answer.
You did not address the question. You addressed the issue of slavery versus servitude. And that's not what my question is about.
No, I saw there are two differences. No, I said slavery was in Africa. We know that. That's documented. I just said that 3 times. That's documented. We know that.
You said servitude was in Africa. I'm asking you, within the tenets of Christianity, in the tenets of the Ifa tradition, Were there humanitarian pretensions against slavery? Yes or no?
I'm telling you that E5 traditions do not practice on paper, did not practice slavery. I'm not saying that other people didn't went out to practice because slavery was exist. It did happen. What I'm saying as a whole, most spiritual people do not believe in slavery, bro. African people who stole people in slavery had their own agenda. We know that. So what are you trying to get at? What are you trying to prove?
All right. That got a little turned up. Check it out. So let me make sure we clear on your answer.
Hey, let me finish because I asked him the same question. He didn't answer the question. I said,
I did answer the question. I did answer the question, bro. I did answer the question, bro. The Bible specifically.
Okay, hold on. Let everybody stop. Hold on. So Jamal, with regards to your answer to the question, your answer was no, or was that your answer?
My answer was clear. In the Ephraim tradition that I was taught, that I practice, slavery is something that we do not celebrate. We don't practice it. I told him that I can admit that during the time there were African people who were sold into slavery by African kings. That's documented. So that's a well-known fact. So you mentioning that to prove a point to me. You ain't proving no point to me.
Okay.
I'm not trying to prove a point.
Jamal,
I'm asking you a question.
So Jerome, why wasn't that satisfactory to you?
Thank you.
Because he said he made it to me, and I may be off with this. He made the assumption to me, just by the way he answered the question, that the Ifa tradition does not condone or celebrate slavery. I'm asking him, where is it actually expressed in the Ifa tradition that there are humanitarian pretensions against slavery? That's all I'm asking.
Which I have to show it because you can't access it if you're not a part of the tradition. There's verses and stuff that's hidden that you cannot find. It's not like you go to a Bible, you can pick out a verse. That's not how E5 works. It's a different system. So I'm trying to explain there's a difference in that. I understand your question. I would have to show you that myself personally, but I answer the question how I answer it. Yes, slavery does exist, even in that time, but that's a political move. That's not religious. You making slavery into a spiritual concept. You talking about something political.
I didn't try to make it into a spiritual concept. I asked you what humanitarian pretensions are in the Ifa tradition that stand against slavery. It doesn't have anything to do with it being political or anything like that.
Slavery is a political concept, Jerome.
Okay, so the bottom line was,
come on now.
Jerome was asking,
right,
was there something in the E5 tradition that, and that was the 10 minutes, but he was asking, was there a particular passage, edict, doctrine in the E5 tradition that prohibits slavery? And your answer was, yes, it is.
Yes, I have to show them that because it's not, you can't go to a Bible and find that. That's not how E5 tradition works. There's many things, many writings that we don't have access to, but it is documented. I have to show it to you when we get out of this platform. It's okay.
Gotcha.
But then you took it to the step, like you was like saying that, well, like it was an issue because slavery exists in the African context. We know slavery exists in Africa. We know it's documented. So it's
we can move on now. What's your question for Jerome? And I'm gonna reset the timer because it looked like we definitely gonna need more than 10 minutes.
Yeah. So I flipped it back to him. I said, well, if you asking me that, I'm asking you the same thing. What teachings did Jesus have that would against slavery? What did he do to abolish slavery in his time? Is there anything documented? Because in my perspective, I have not seen that.
All right, Jerome, it's on y'all.
Like I said, bro, if you look at the book of Timothy explicitly speaks against slave trading and slave traders.
Did Jesus say that? Did the book of Timothy say that?
What was the book of Timothy inspired by?
You're not answering my question. You're talking around my question.
I'm not talking around your question. I'm asking you what if the book of Timothy was inspired by Christ and it speaks against slavery, then Christ is the reference point for that particular passage, right?
You look in the Gospels, and the Gospels have most of Jesus' teachings and sayings as what I've been taught. Is there anything in the Gospels that Jesus said about slavery? Did he abide? It's not in there now, but is there anything in there that Jesus said something about slavery in the Gospels?
You just
In
answered your question before you asked it. So
is it in there? There's no
nah.
proof. It's not it. What? Jesus, the Savior.
You just answered the question before you asked it, but I'll go ahead and say no, because it's nothing, even there's no subject on slavery in the gospel. No.
All right. Just want to make sure we clear with that. Okay. Okay. So then my question would become then, so what do you do? How do you reconcile that? Because if he's a savior of freedom and liberation, but he speaks in no slavery, how do you reconcile that concept?
Okay, number one, that your question would have some validity if he condoned slavery, which he didn't. And second, when you think about Jesus's whole purpose for coming on the earth, it was to abolish us from self-bondage, which is a type of slavery, but it goes beyond this physical type of slavery. It's spiritual. So in that regard, Jesus is our spiritual abolitionist.
So are you telling me that Jesus came and watched his folks suffer in chains and bondage and did nothing? Is what you telling me?
His folks, who are you talking about?
You said Jesus came. You said self bondage, spiritual. You mentioned spiritual elements. Are you saying that Jesus came on the earth and watched his people suffer in chains under Roman Empire and did nothing? Is what you telling me?
Again, Jesus's whole purpose for coming was not to liberate the people from Roman oppression. It was more spiritual. It had everything to do with self-bondage.
So are you saying
You don't understand what self-bondage is? Self-bondage has more spiritual implications than it does physical. So in that regard.
But is that not the purpose of liberation as who Jesus supposed to be?
Spiritual liberation. You're talking about liberation from chattel slavery. Now, if you want to go there with it, the abolitionist movement was started by Christians. It wasn't started by anybody in the Ifa tradition or anybody who was practicing the Ifa tradition. Nobody from the Ifa tradition tried to come over from Africa and save our ancestors from slavery.
Mm-hmm. And you had to mention one point where they have their own problems in Africa. So what are you saying? How can they come over here when they got their own context going on in their country?
I'm just letting it be known. They might have even facilitated in the enslavement of our ancestors in the first place. So if you want to go that route with it, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm speaking strictly on spiritual liberation. I'm not talking about liberation from any type of oppression under any type of physical government.
But that's my struggle though. How can you just come for the spiritual implications when your people is suffering in front of you? It's not your physical is equal to your spiritual. It's not your human value life worth something here on earth while your people getting. I mean, does it make sense or don't make sense? All right, what I'm missing?
You're missing the whole point of why he came. He came to liberate people from self-bondage. If you don't understand the concept of self-bondage, then you're not gonna understand why he came. You so wrapped up in liberation from oppression that you missing the whole point why he even came. Now, I don't see any of the deities associated with the Ifa tradition trying to liberate anybody from any type of bondage. So you know what I'm saying?
Okay. If that's what you feel or believe is cool, I'm not here to change that. I'm not here to debate you with that. I'm just trying to understand, the purpose of the question. And so it led into my understanding of what you was asking me. So what I'm saying is I understand the self-bondage, you made that clear. I understand that it's a spiritual thing. You made that clear too. What I'm saying is I might not agree with it, but I totally understand it. if you come to now again, it's antithetical because most black people in the church see Jesus as a liberator, not just spiritually, but physically. When you preach every Sunday about oppression in America, you're not talking about nothing spiritual. You talking about what's going on in your everyday life.
Oh, and that goes back to what I
No?
mentioned earlier. As followers of Christ, we have a mandate to liberate the oppressed, to liberate the oppressed, to stand against injustice. And you know that I've been a part of a couple of protests with you. So I mean, that part, that we do have a
You didn't say
mandate
that. You
to do
said
that.
you,
I'm
you,
talking.
no, you
Oh my God, you got what you got confused is you have the purpose of Christ's coming, which involves spiritual liberation, which
Mhm.
what we have as far as followers of Christ as a mandate. We have a mandate to fight against oppression and things of that nature. Christ didn't come for that.
and how.
Christ came to liberate us spiritually.
So what was the purpose of him coming then?
I
What was
just
the
explained that to you like 3 times, bro.
having people to follow him if he was not going to liberate them from a physical bondage on this earth?
I just explained that 3 times, bro. His they thought he was. If you look at the narrative, they thought that's why he came, but he came for a greater purpose, and that was to liberate people from spiritual bondage through salvation. But
Okay.
again, as Christians, we have a mandate to pursue justice, to uplift the oppressed, and things of that nature. So it ain't either way you look at it. And that's really why the abolitionist movement got started in the first place, and that's what freed our ancestors from chattel slavery. It wasn't anything associated with the Ifa tradition.
You don't have to be. It's like
Oh,
you
okay. All right.
trying to knock spirituality where that's really besides the point. You don't have to knock spirituality because you don't agree with what they do or you don't agree with their
You've been knocking
practices.
Christianity since you started, bro.
Oh, you said slavery by E5, and I explained it by answer. You didn't like my answer. So basically, you don't like
Your answer wasn't addressing the
2
question.
minutes. 2 minutes.
It's okay. You
Your
don't have
answer
to
wasn't addressing the question. You saying that there's a passage that you have no access to, so you probably don't even know it exists.
you don't have access
And
to.
so it just I'm kind of speculative on that particular answer that you gave, but you know, if you can show it to me, bro, I'll appreciate that.
That will happen. That's why we have this conversation. When you don't understand something that you have not studied, of course you're going to have these issues about what I'm saying. It doesn't make sense to you. It's not supposed to make sense because we don't have the same vernacular. So I understand that. What I'm saying is you mentioned the slavery concept and you use slavery in a derogatory term towards spirituality when that was unnecessary. We
How
talk
did I
about
do that?
explain slavery, I explain servitude. There's two different.
How did I use slavery in a derogatory term?
You attack spirituality with slavery concept. Like it's not a political.
Attack spirituality with a slavery concept. How did I do that? Because I asked you a simple question about the tenets associated with the Ifa tradition. It wasn't necessarily an attack. It was to gain understanding as to why you decided to follow that tradition based on the conversation that we have had.
Ifa didn't did that. So basically, you trying to say Ifa didn't do anything in America, which they probably didn't, because they had their own issues in their country before they got over here. Now, the abolitionists that you mentioned, they had their own reason for why they created it. Not all created on goodwill. Let's not kid ourselves. You said we all have a sinful nature. If that's the case, some could have did that in their own greed and selfishness. So let's be real now. We talking real.
30 seconds.
Bro,
30 seconds.
now you harping on conspiracy theories. I mean, let's not go down that road.
They're human, bro. You said they're human. They got issues. A lot of people do shit on their own. Selfishness, greed, power, control. That's what people do. That's what you said earlier. That's not what you told me earlier.
But that has nothing to do with humanitarian pretensions against slavery, bro. You going in a whole different direction. Now, the abolitionist movement was predicated on the biblical concept that all men are made.
That's time. That's time.
Nobody deserves to be enslaved.
All right. It's getting turned up. It's getting turned up. So listen.
That's why I said earlier in the
hold on. That's time for that particular subject. So, Jamal, it's your turn to ask him a question because we stayed on the subject that he asked.
Yeah, we did.
We're gonna reset it for 10 minutes. You ask him a question, and we'll keep it pushing. But it's not gonna be on slavery.
Yeah, no, I know. We passed that. You know, we stand out all, so we good. Let me see, man. Let me see. Let me think of a good question. We have a good conversation. That is there any proof that Hasatan was an evil adversary to God?
I know where you got that question from.
Did you hear the question, Jerome?
Yeah, I heard him.
All right. It's on y'all. Timer starts now.
Yeah, Jay.
Well, if you go into passages like, because I think the passage you're talking about is Job chapter 1, verse 6. If you go into other passages like Zechariah chapter 3, verse 1, Revelation 12 and 10, you'll find that Satan is viewed in that same light.
Okay. So let me ask you this then, because I want to make sure I get it clear. So if you ever did the study on the name Hasatan, the study would tell you that he was not an adversary of evil, but an adversary of making you better, right? So in the Garden of Eden, they mentioned this being that causes them to eat this particular fruit, and they gain consciousness, they gain understanding of self. Now, this being from study was a being to make them be better than what they were. How do you consider that to be evil?
Okay. First of all, your explanation of the being in the garden, from what I know, is rooted in theosophy, which I think Helena Blavatsky is the mother of, and she was a self-proclaimed worshiper of Satan. So her entire view of Satan, she tried to paint Satan in this picture as him actually being the savior, him being the person that enlightened humanity by not coercing them, but what he said in Genesis chapter 3. If you eat the fruit, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. But the problem with that stance is when you look at the actual narrative, they only got to know good and evil through experience. And that's not necessarily a good thing. And that goes back to what we talked about in our previous discussion. When you think about the human condition and you think about all the ailments that come along with the human condition, you go back to that particular passage where Satan told Eve if she ate of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, she would be like God. Her eyes would be open. She would know good and evil. But Satan didn't tell her that she would have to gain that knowledge through experience, which is why there's an old adage that says knowledge is experience is the primary source of knowledge. You know what I'm saying? So I get your question, but the question is, it comes from somebody who was an advocate of Lucifer. So
Okay. Because I asked that because, like I said, when you do the research on Hasatan, it doesn't have no evil attribute to it. It's just a being that makes you better than what you are. It's a being that tests who you are. So if testing you who you are mean that that's something that's evil, then we have to go back and look at that more deeply. I don't know how we get this duality with that, because if you're saying that Satan
there is no duality, because if you're going by the narrative, God essentially made everything good. And the figure that you're talking about what he did
Mm-hmm.
had a number of consequences.
Mm-hmm.
The most profound consequence being that we lost our original righteousness as human beings, and we lost direct communion with God. So I don't understand how that could be considered a good thing at all.
Are you telling me that one being can cause a whole generation to lose its righteousness to a sovereign great God? Is that what you're telling me?
I mean, that's what happened, right? And that wasn't it had nothing to do with God's sovereignty. It had everything to do with God, with man's free will and choice to disobey God's command. So that doesn't bring God's sovereignty into question at all.
If God is sovereign and if God is all knowing and all powerful and God give grace, and not is that to do with God's sovereignty? Because God knows all and does all and gives all, does that mean sovereignty at all?
Bro, you talking about God, I'm talking about man. Man doesn't know all. Man isn't sovereign. Man made a choice, a conscious choice to
Mm-hmm.
disobey a command of God,
Mm-hmm.
and the consequences follow. So, you know what I'm saying? If anything, that particular incident was the first case of indoctrination.
In what way?
Number one, he told Eve that she would be like God, knowing good and evil. God
Mm-hmm.
knows good and evil, but God doesn't have to experience good and evil like we do. Number two, she I forgot where I was going with it, but um her and Adam,
Mm-hmm.
even though they didn't die right directly, I mean right at that moment, death was
Mm-hmm.
imminent for them. You know what I'm saying? So um if that's not enough to allow you to understand that this figure that deceived Eve in the garden had no good intentions for humanity, then I don't understand what will.
So you believe that this being deceived a being with no consciousness? You telling me that God made them without knowing anything, so they don't know what good or evil is anyway. So how can this being deceive you if they don't have no knowledge of what deception is? I'm struggling.
You don't have to
I'm
have
not.
you don't have to have knowledge of something to be deceived. You can be deceived without knowing you're being deceived, bro.
Not when you're a tool. Remember now, they are people with no conscience, so they're not human now in a sense because they can't
What
think
are
for
you
themselves.
talking about? What are you talking about, bro? If they couldn't think for themselves, then how did they make the conscious decision to follow what Satan told them to do, bro?
Prior to Hassan's encounter with Adam and Eve, these are people in the garden with no worries, no consciousness, no nothing. So
What are you
basically,
talking about, bro? They had that's one of the communicable attributes that they share with God. That consciousness, our very consciousness comes directly from the creator.
it didn't, it
It's
wasn't
not something that magically appeared when they disobeyed God.
it wasn't there. You said
How
you
was
said
it?
they didn't know nothing. They were just there in the garden.
If they
Didn't
didn't
know.
know nothing, then how did Adam name all the animals?
You just said that Hassan deceived them. So
He
they had
did.
they didn't have no way to choose right or wrong. They didn't know between right and wrong. Is what you telling me?
They made a conscious choice. They made a conscious choice to choose to follow what he said instead of following what God said. That's not that. How does that negate their conscious choice
So
to disobey God's command? I don't understand that.
basically, they don't have no choice. There's no free will at all. Then is what you telling me.
How? How is there no free will when they freely chose to follow Satan?
Now we going
That
back
was
to the
free choice.
natural. God created everything in the dark void. So God knows all and sees all. So God already knew what they're going to do before they did it. That's what you're telling me.
Again, we're talking about Adam and Eve, right?
Yes.
We're not talking about God's foreknowledge. We're talking about Adam and Eve and their conscious choice to
God,
disobey God, bro.
did God place him there in the garden? That's according to the narrative. Did God put him there?
Yeah, he put them there, but he didn't put them there for them to disobey him. That was their choice.
1 minute, 30 seconds.
That's the struggle. That's the hung up for me, Jerome. I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't make sense you're gonna place people in the garden and tell them what they cannot do. Then all of a sudden the being come out of nowhere and tell them that they can do this, and God does nothing. That doesn't make sense, bro.
So
According to
you
the
you
Bible.
expected God to give somebody free will and then intervene on them making a choice? Now
Because they
that
don't have,
doesn't make sense.
if God
That
was
doesn't
all,
make sense, bro.
it don't exist. If you
What?
saying he was all, and God put him there
What
without
do
the
you
ability to,
mean?
there is no free will. It was the
How was there
satanic.
no free will if how was there no free will? If there was no free will, Satan would have not had the ability to even deceive Eve and Adam in the first place.
God didn't give him free will. Her
Oh
satanic gave
man,
him free will,
bro.
and then as a result, they was
Let's just
penalized.
move on because you making it more complicated than it is, bro.
Narrative.
20 seconds.
All right, next question,
Let's
bro.
let's just move on.
All right. All right. So now I'm gonna throw a question in the hat and I'm gonna let y'all dialogue on this question. All right. As it pertains to Black people,
Ooh.
this is Paradigm Shift TV 314. This is about the business of Black people.
Of course,
So,
of course.
as it pertains to Black people and their spiritual invocation, why is Christianity better for them
Mm.
in this earthly walk? Why is the Ifa tradition better for them in this earthly walk? Point, counterpoint, etc. This is a dialogue between y'all saying which one y'all believe is better. We'll start with Brother Jerome. We'll kick it over to Brother Jamal. Y'all got 10 minutes. Go back and forth. Time starts now.
All right, for me, for when it comes to Black people in this country, their history here, how they progressed, and things of that nature, I believe that Christianity is better because if you think about the history, when you go back and do the research about, uh, let's start with chattel slavery. Let's start with chattel. I know we really wasn't supposed to go back on that, but let's start with that since we're talking about the sojourn of Black people in this country. When you think about people like Nat Turner, you think about people like Harriet Tubman, even when you think about the Stono Rebellion, all those people involved in those three events, whether it be the Underground Railroad, Nat Turner's Rebellion, or the Stoner Rebellion, all those Black people were Christian. No denying that. You know what I'm saying? And even in the case of Nat Turner and Harriet Tubman, Nat Turner got direct revelation from God. You know what I'm saying? Harriet Tubman said it was the voice of God that guided her on her mission to liberate our people. The Congolese people who started the Stono Rebellion, they were Christian, and they were Christian before they came to America. When you think about the Great Awakening that took place during chattel slavery, this Great Awakening was one of the, if not the first, attempt at challenging white supremacy. You know what I'm saying? Of course, we know that the abolitionist movement was rooted in biblical Christianity. But if you want to go post-slavery, a lot of the neighborhoods that we built in our the communities that we developed were based on Christianity. Historically Black colleges based on Christianity. You know what I'm saying? Even when you think about some of the greatest Black communities, Black Wall Street, that was based on Christianity. So, and even when you go past that, when you go to the fight for Black people to have equal rights and to gain humanitarian rights in this country. That was spearheaded by figures who were Black Christians. You know what I'm saying? And their stances were rooted in the Bible. You know what I'm saying? So and even when you think about what the Black church itself has done, the list of contributions is, I mean, it's very long, very, very long. You know what I'm saying? Oh, man, just, I mean, building housing units for seniors, scholarships for Black students, prison ministries, several different charity organizations, financial literacy, credit unions, all that stuff is predicated on the Black church when it comes to the Black community. So I feel like the track record for Christianity and what it has done for Black people is really, and I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything like that, but I feel like the track record is too long for any other ideology to even try to challenge that. I think maybe the closest that we do have is the Nation of Islam, because you can't deny what the Nation of Islam did for people psychologically. But you know, I may be close to, you know, the end of my time, so you know, I'll just close with that.
All right, Brother Jerome, you took almost exactly 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes and 12 seconds left on the clock, so that's half of the 10 minutes y'all had. Brother Jamal, go ahead and finish this thing out, and then I got another, because he just sparked another question that I want y'all, and I wanted y'all to kind of bounce off of each other, but he just sparked something else I want to ask that I think is pertinent. But go ahead and finish this out and tell us why the Ephi tradition is better for Black people.
Let me answer it in this way. I'm gonna answer it completely different than you expected. I think that Ephi is one of many great spiritualities that is for Black people. It's not this the main perfect spirituality, because it's not. Anytime you have human thought and human people, it's gonna have some flaws in it. Let's be real. So I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it can serve as a purpose, and many other spirituality can as well. To respond to Jerome, I'm not denying the contribution of the Black church. I'm not denying none of the stuff that you said, but in foresight, then how do you reconcile with the same religion that tear down your community? How do you reconcile the same religion that has enslaved your people in the name of Christianity? How do you reconcile this religion that has promoted capitalism at any cost? How do you reconcile the same religion where we as Black folks still are not treated as human beings, and we go to church every Sunday looking for answers, and there is no answers to be answered? So yes, Christianity in a sense did some justice because of the interpretation, but you have other people who also claim to be Christians, who are not Black, who do not care about the Black interests of this country, has done tragedies towards Black folks under the name of Jesus Christ. How do you reconcile that? So you can't say Christianity is the perfect religion, because we know its track record too has also been bad for Black folks in this country by itself. So we can't say that it's the perfect. I'm not saying that it's not great. I'm not saying it's not bad. I'm just saying that you can't say it's perfect, because it's not. It has flaws in it. It has some things that is not good for Black folks in this country, and it's documented. That's why you have the Nation of Islam. That's why you have all these other religions popping up, right? Because they feel like Christianity has not served its purpose for Black folks in this country. And you got to reconcile that. You got to deal with that. And a lot of times we want to deal with the bad side. We want to deal with the good side, because that's what has happened. That's what we've been taught in school. Martin King Jr. and all the other folks. Nat Turner was a Christian, but what Christianity version was he was given? Because remember, he was taught that by white people. He didn't learn that by himself. He was taught that. So because he was taught that by somebody else, their interpretation, his own interpretation was skewed. It wasn't authentic. You live in a country where everything has propaganda. Even in those times, everything was political. It just wasn't sophisticated as it was now. Everything's sophisticated now. But even his understanding of God was different because of who taught him. Now, luckily, he had embraced the ancestors' resistance. It just wasn't just Christianity. That was African spirituality in there. Because in the movie, you saw the rain shot going in the circle. That's African. That ain't Christian. That ain't white. That's black. That's we don't talk about these elements. See, we understand that. We miss all that. All that's African spirituality. All that. But we don't talk about it. So I understand the track record, I understand what they've done. I'm not taking that away from them. But on the flip side, there are some things that those who also call themselves Christians have done a lot of bad towards black people in this country. And we got to reconcile that. We can't forget that. That's just all to it. So, but
can I reconcile that right quick?
Go ahead and respond, Jerome.
All right. First thing I want to say is when you start talking about these people who were quote unquote Christian and committed these atrocities against our people, you would have to prove that these people were actually Christian, because when you break down the word Christian, a Christian is a person that's supposed to perpetually follow the teachings of Christ. Now, when you go to another people's land, you subjugate them, you teach them that they're inferior, you plunder their resources, and you enslave them. Is that following the teachings of Christ? No. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to check out this concept that was around during that time called manifest destiny. And though it has no biblical basis whatsoever, these same people who almost eradicated the Indians and, took millions of Africans from their land and subjugated them, made them feel inferior, did some of the most heinous things humanly possible to these people, our ancestors. They did all of this because, according to them, what they were doing was God ordained. You know what I'm saying? So they were operating not under Christ or Christianity. They were operating under their own vices. They were operating under the spirit of material acquisition. They were operating under their flesh. And that is specifically what the Bible speaks against. So the way that I reconcile it is that none of what they did had any biblical basis. None of it can even fall under the definition of Christianity or under the definition of a Christian. So, you know what I'm saying? I understand why some people may have a problem with this white evangelical, white supremacist so-called Christianity, but even brothers like Frederick Douglass knew the difference. Nat Turner knew the difference. And you're going by the movie narrative that says that it was African spirituality that was a catalyst behind his rebellion. But according to his own words, it was a revelation that he got from God, and it wasn't the God of that his ancestors served. It was the God of the Bible. So for me, I would rather go on his actual words than what a movie narrative portrayed, which we know that movie narratives, they add stuff and they take away stuff. So, you know what I'm saying? That's how I reconcile that.
You would have to say that you talked to all these white folks who said they were Christians.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. Because based on their actions alone, these people were nominal Christians at best, which means they were only Christian by their own self-definition. Because if they were true followers of Christ, then their hearts wouldn't allow them to do what they did to our ancestors.
That's not per se. You just said that human people have sinful nature. So you can't make that assumption.
But once you have salvation, salvation is not going to allow you to even begin to do what they did to our ancestors, bro. You can't. There's no way you can try couple that with salvation, bro. No way.
You tell these white folks that they are not
tell them nothing. I'm going about what they did. I'm going about what they did.
Get that. You miss what I'm saying. You won't have to tell these people that they are not something that they profess, and that's not your authority to do. You can't do that.
Not? If their actions are diametrically opposed to the teachings of Christ, then they're not Christian. That's point blank, period, bro.
The Bible for their justification. So again,
that in and of itself is because first of all, they use portions of the Bible. Second of all, they made up concepts and ideas like the curse of Ham, which is not even in the Bible, to justify the enslavement of our people. So that's almost like somebody using a hammer, which we know is used for repairing purposes, to kill somebody. Now, if somebody uses a hammer to kill another person, are you gonna blame the hammer or are you gonna blame the person?
So you tell me murder not in the Bible, or bullying mass not in the Bible?
You're not even answering my question, bro.
It's in the text now. That's what they use.
Not answering my question. If somebody uses a hammer to kill a person, even though that hammer is not used for that, wasn't made for that purpose, are you gonna blame the hammer or are you gonna blame the person? Yes or no?
Blame both, because both are holistic. There's no duality in that.
What do you mean holistic? A hammer is used for a specific purpose. It's not used for the purpose of killing another person. But man in his sinful nature would take a hammer and use it to bash somebody's brains out, even though that's not what the hammer was invented for. So again, answer my question. Would you blame the hammer or would you blame the person?
Both, because at the end of the day, you can't make a distinction between.
God, bro.
The human being used the hammer. The human being made the hammer for a specific purpose.
And it's not the murder. That's my point. A human being didn't make the hammer to use it as an instrument to murder another person. It's for the purposes of repairing something or building something. So again, if that's the purpose of the hammer, and the human in his sinful nature decides he's going to use the hammer to kill another person, then I'm going to blame the human. Because the hammer can't control what the human does with it, but the hammer does have a specific purpose. And that's my point.
All I'm saying is you have to talk to these good white folks and tell them that they're not Christian. You can't do that because that's what they profess.
How can I do that? They don't have a monopoly on Christianity.
You don't either. So again, you can't tell them what they're not.
What has a monopoly on Christianity is the Bible and Christ. And if they're not following his teachings thoroughly, if they're racist towards another people, if they're out there committing atrocities, they're not true followers of Christ, bro. And there's no way you can even make that conflation.
Everything that you mentioned is biblical. Everything from racism down to murder down to
racism. Because racism wasn't even a thing during biblical times, so that negates your point about racism. Racism in and of itself is a construct of Europeans that came way later.
Rape? I'm talking about in the Bible. All these things that you said is sinful is in the Bible.
You're going off of the topic, bro.
What you mean?
Because even if you mention rape is mentioned in the Bible, but rape is not condoned in the Bible.
I didn't say it was. I'm just saying that they
don't try to make it seem like
these white folks are not Christian because they don't practice what you think is suitable. They believe that's
what I think. I'm talking objectively here, bro. I'm not talking about what I think or my perception. I'm talking objectively.
2 minutes.
If these people are not,
get in there, because we ain't really got to hear from you. So get in there.
So I mean,
yeah. What? So let me ask you this, because
I'm struggling with this now. You can't tell me this.
How?
Black folks are not Christian. Remember, Christianity
Christian?
It's a profession religion. I profess
with a Christian.
in the text, no?
Jerome, let him go. Let him go. What are you saying?
He's missing my point. Christianity is a profession religion. In the same Bible we talk about says, I profess with my mouth. These white folks profess with their mouth that they they are Christians. It might not be the way you want it, but you can't tell them that they're not Christians because they don't follow what you say is Christ. You can't do that because somebody can tell you that you're not following Jesus' teachings because you never met Jesus. You can't say that.
What are you talking about? Bro, we went over that already. I had an encounter with Christ. And you can't say that I didn't. But what I'm saying is for these people to call themselves Christian and to do things that are diametrically opposed to what Christ taught says to me and anybody else that they were not Christian.
That's subjective. That's your opinion.
Subjective. How is that subjective when they are objectively doing things that go against the teachings of Christ, bro?
You can't speak for people who you don't know. This is what they do.
I know what they did though, right? I don't have to know them personally, but I know what they did. You know what they did. The hosts know what they did, and it does not line up with the teachings of Christ.
A particular version. I'm not saying the version in Africa. I'm talking about in America. They profess a particular
Christianity. You can't. There's no versions of Christianity. Christianity is Christianity. Either you follow it wholly or you don't follow it at all, bro.
This is my point, Jerome. Everything has versions to it. That's why they're offshoots of different religion. Judaism was before Christianity. That's an offshoot of Judaism. Everything has a version to it.
That's a fallacy.
Every car has a version to it. You have the same car and title with different body features. Everything has a version to it. You missing my point. So the version practice is not the version that you agree with. That's okay.
It has nothing to do with whether I agree with it. I'm going from an objective.
Right, that's time. So now, look, now let me say this because I think this brings up an interesting dialogue, and it could be you and Jamal, it could be me and you, me and nobody who trust and believe the gospel. But this brings up an interesting dialogue because when we talk about Christianity, the brothers say there are different versions or variations of belief. You say that's not true. But then we do have an individual who is well known, well respected in the tradition of Christianity by the name of James White, who is on record defending Robert E. Lee, the general of the Confederate Army, who he says was a great Christian man who should be respected for his era because it was a different time. Now walk with me. He says because it was a different time, he shouldn't be held in contempt for practicing slavery because it was a different time. And so I think that that's an interesting dialogue to kind of dive into, because if you saying, no, they weren't really Christians, but we have Christians who are saying, well, because it was a different time, that behavior can be excused because of X, Y, Z. I think that's an interesting topic to delve into. But this was the question I wanted to bring up with regards to y'all dialogue. So we talk about the impact of Christianity, the benefits thereof versus the benefits of the Ephi tradition. And that long record that Jerome talked about. And I don't even think, even with everything he named, I don't even think he even hit the tip of the iceberg, right? With regards to what the Black church has done for people in this country. But that being the case, is that because our people, as Dr. Khalid Muhammad would say, didn't have a thorough knowledge of self, and Christianity was, for many years, the only thing they knew, due to, in large part, what they were introduced, here, what some were introduced to on the continent.
Mhm.
Is it fair to compare the record of Christianity when we know many of our people didn't come into the knowledge of these indigenous African spiritual concepts, at least as they were presented in a positive light until fairly recently? That's the question I want y'all to bounce off of each other. And this is not for y'all to, one of y'all kind of extrapolate on. I want y'all to kind of bounce back and forth with it, if you can. Y'all got 10 minutes.
Yeah, come on. You know I back you up.
All right. So my thing is, to that point, you have to consider the fact that many of these people, some of which I named, weren't Christian because of the fact that they were supposedly introduced to this tradition by Europeans. It was because of their own direct spiritual experiences. You know what I'm saying? So, because think about it now, if their reason for being Christian and having these spiritual experiences was based on it supposedly being forced on them by the white man, or whatever, however you want to slice it, then would they still have had these spiritual experiences?
I would say that what Bianchi has mentioned can be fairly accurate. I'm not saying that Black folks don't have spiritual experiences. Nobody never negate that fact. But I will say that what he's mentioned can have some credence in it, because we know that mostly throughout history, particularly in this country, Christianity is very popular among people in this world, in this country. And so if all I have is this in front of me, and I'm being told that this is something that's going to save my soul and this is something that's going to make me better, then of course most folks are going to try it out to see what it's about, not knowing if it's good or not. Folks want to see what it's about. That's just us being human. We want to know what this is. Now, I don't know if it's denial of self, or we don't know self well. That could still be credence too, because of all the psychological trauma that Black folks had to deal with in this country. You can have a skewed understanding of yourself. And because of that, you're going to latch on to something that might can help repair yourself, even though it might not be good for you. That is natural. We humans, we does do that. So there's some credence into it. I don't know how much is it, but I think there's some credence into that. There is some parts where we, as ourself, has lost that authentic self of us, and we had to find something to help repair that self of that psychological trauma. I don't know if Christianity was the right answer. I think it served its purpose. I think it did help us progress throughout history. I don't think it's the answer though, and that's okay. But it's some credence to that. I mean, like I said, Christianity is very popular. Been popular for a long time. And so most folks go jump on it because that's what you're taught. In the household, you grow up, hey, this is what we was taught. You go to church, you Christian. Everything outside of that, you are forbidden to look at. It doesn't apply to you. And so you're taught that now in your household. You're taught that in your community. Anything outside of Christianity is considered something, like I said, something diabolical, something evil. That's historical. Because again, this conversation in itself is confirmation. Most folks don't talk about spirituality no way. It's all about Christianity or Nation of Islam or whatever. That's the popular religions. We don't talk about spirituality like that. We never really do. So there's some credence to that. I can see that. It's not a knock on Christianity, but it is what it is. Loss of self, you got to find something to repair that. And Christianity was again popularized through the Great Awakening, through Thomas Aquinas and all this, the Protestant movement. All that stuff helped create what we have now called Christianity, and that been popularized, right? So there's some stuff to that. There's credence to that. I can go with that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you do have to consider the fact that the Black nationalist movement in this country was started pretty much by the Black church.
Okay.
And that Pan-African ideology that you follow was started by a well-renowned Christian in Marcus. Well, I won't say that it was actually started by him, but he was the figurehead pretty much behind it, because when you think about Pan-Africanism, you automatically think about Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey was he was not ashamed or afraid to let it be known that he was a Christian.
Oh, I have no being Christian. I just chose a different path because I have a choice to do so. Like I can practice Pan-African and not Christian. So I mean,
I don't know why you bringing that up, because I didn't necessarily, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about Marcus Garvey. Like you chose to follow the Ifa tradition. That's your prerogative. But
a lot of people attack me on that level. Well, how you Marcus Garvey when you're not Christian? So I just let it be known before we get to that. Yes, I know he was a professing Christian, but again, I chose what I chose. Let's let it be known. It's okay. It's not an attack towards you. It's just a conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but a lot of people who embrace Pan-Africanism do attack Christianity, and they do attack Black Christians, and that is that's the irony in that is, it boggles my mind sometimes. You know what I'm saying? But and when you talk about knowledge of self, I believe what Bianchi was specifically talking about was our heritage, our lineage, things like that, things that were pretty much lost for a lot of us in regards to our ancestors being brought over here and subject to slavery and stuff like that. I think that white supremacy and white evangelism did play a significant part in us losing that part of ourselves. I can openly admit that. But what I will say is that the ideology of Christianity in and of itself is culturally compatible to us. Say if I found out that, my ancestors were like from the Congo or from the Wolof tribe or something like that. In finding that out, I wouldn't have it wouldn't put my being a Christian in jeopardy. I could find out everything about the culture to the T and still be a Christian, because Christianity is that culturally compatible with anybody's culture, whether it's African, Mexican, whatever the case may be. So, I always have that at the back of my mind. And even right now, I'm a Christian, but I embrace the philosophy of Ubuntu. You know what I'm saying? And that's a universal African philosophy. And it's a beautiful philosophy. Once you learn about it, you learn about, the lessons behind it and things like that, man. I use that stuff in my everyday life. You know what I'm saying? And certain things within it I can couple with me being a Christian and me following the teachings of Christ. So, you know what I'm saying? But that's just me though. You know what I'm saying? I don't know about and I can't speak for anybody else, but that's just me and my walk.
I mean, I can understand it, but like you mentioned culturally compatible. I mean, I struggle with that. I can say it's culturally popularized. I mean, I'm gonna stick with that. I don't know if it's culturally compatible for all people, because all people are not Christians. Most people could be, but there's a lot of people who don't profess Christianity. There's a lot of people who don't really like Christianity because of their own personal reasons. So I don't know if it's culturally compatible, but it's culturally popular.
That doesn't necessarily negate. And sorry to cut you off, man. I gotta say this though, man. Like that doesn't negate my point. If you decide to embrace Christianity, then you don't necessarily have to abandon your culture. That's my point.
So you saying that Christianity and culture are the same? They work together in the same, or this? I mean, what are you saying?
They can align with each other. It's nothing. I mean that. Look at how the Coptic.
1 minute.
look at how the Coptic Christians incorporated Christianity into their culture. That's a prime example. The Ethiopians, they incorporated Christianity into their culture, even though they didn't have to transition from what we would call paganism into Christianity, because they already had Judaism almost 1,000 years before Christianity came on the scene. But if you go into West Africa, there are people, there are Africans in Yoruba who are Christian, and you know their Christianity is compatible with their culture. You know what I'm saying? If you go into Latin America, they are Christian, but Christianity is culturally compatible with them in their culture. You know what I'm saying? It's only in this country in the West where Christianity.
All right, that's time. Go ahead and finish your thought, Jerome.
I was gonna make this last point. It's only in this country, and I'm sure everybody on a part of this discussion, and everybody that's going to be listening can agree that it's only in the West that they try to make people express Christianity in a Eurocentric way. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of us are aware of that, and a lot of us are and have rejected this Eurocentricity that the West has attached to Christianity.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that point, and I think we can all agree too that only in this country has the black man and woman been stripped of their heritage, their history, their spirituality in many ways, and so I think that where people in Africa who never lost their indigenous culture, they can make a quantitative and cognitive decision on whether they want to stick with that spirituality or go to Christianity, and whichever decision they make, that's fine. But for a lot of Black people in this country, that choice is informed from your childhood, because a lot of times we are inundated with Christianity or Islam, depending on which household we grow up in, from childhood. And so even as we get older and we sort of break away from that, those things still kind of resonate with us. And though we have to make a choice, and the choice has to be ours, and we can't say, well, I did it because of my youth or because of how I grew up, we still have to make that cognitive choice. The choice is still informed by what we grew up knowing. And I don't think that that's avoidable. Whereas those people can actually see the dichotomies between, okay, I grew up in the Yoruba, I grew up in the Zulu tradition or whatever tradition it was, and then here's Christianity. Well, Christianity is better for me for whatever reason. Or I don't want to do Christianity or Islam. I want to stick with this African spiritual tradition. And I think that that's the advantage or disadvantage, however you want to look at it, that they have over the diaspora. And, that's just something that we kind of have to wrestle with in our own unique experience and culture here in the wilderness of North America, if you will. Right now, I'm gonna open it up to the rest of the panel for questions. I'm gonna start with our new brother McGee. The first question is for you, brother. I don't know which one of our brothers you got a question for. but the first question is yours. Take your pick, whoever you want to ask the question to. It's on you.
I mean, you know, it both both have logics. I mean, you know, you got African, but our religion was overseas. I mean, it was in America. It had to come over here. It was brought over in America. You see what I'm saying? So it based all that in over in like I said, the first man was in Ethiopia. Egypt was in Africa. You know what I mean? But you know, I believe in God. I'm just a true believer because man, we only did certain things on earth. Ain't no man created stars and I mean, they're just out of context. I mean, show me a man that can say light, or show me a man that created sun, or you know what I mean, as human beings. But you know, hey, I mean, both of them hit on some good topics, and you know, but you know, I'm Christian and I just believe in God, and I don't disbelieve in nobody what they believe in. But you know, hey, it was good listening and hearing, and you know, I mean, keep up the good work.
What's up? What's up? So you don't have a specific question for either one of the brothers?
I mean, they kind of brainstormed it.
Gotcha. Well, hey, you know, welcome to the platform. We're glad you came on and listened in. And anytime you want to come on, speak your speech, lay your demonstration down, you're welcome to do so.
Okay. Blessing.
Appreciate you, fam.
My sister, the missionary, as I call her, Monique Montgomery. You got a question for one of the brothers or both of the brothers?
No, I don't have no question. I'm just listening tonight. I'm gonna be laid back and relaxing.
Got you. Well, I know somebody who got a question, and he goes by nobody. So nobody trust and believe the gospel. I know you got a question for one of the brothers.
All right. Jamal, man, I know the question I told you I was gonna ask at first, but based off what y'all been saying, I got a different question for you. And it's a two-part question.
Okay.
You know what gang banging is, just like everybody else. You know what a blood is, you know what a crip is, right? You also know what their doctrine is, right? So if I was to walk up to you and I was to tell you that I was a crip, but you see me wearing all red, I also have a red flag. I don't hang with any of the people who you know are Crips in the neighborhood. I don't know how to sea walk. And I also wear everything to the right instead of the left. Based off of the doctrine, yes or no, would you think I was a Crip?
No.
Okay. So seeing that you know the doctrine of cripping, and if I did things that went against the doctrine, you wouldn't think that I was a Crip. So when it comes to the Bible, why is it that the Bible has a doctrine that tells you who a Christian is based off of the fruits? So why is it that can you see people, the European white man who did what they did to us in America, why do you think that they are Christians when they are not following the doctrine of Christianity?
Well, see, that's my hung up. See, and we had that with Jerome. I like the question. It makes sense, but it's a simple answer to that, Jay. So again, it's like you saying that they don't have access to the same Bible as you. They have the same access to the same Bible that you have, right? So of course they have their own interpretations, and they're going to practice how they want to practice, do their own perspective. So we don't have the authority to tell them who they cannot be. That's not my job to tell you. Now, you can disagree with how they practice their religion and what their perspective, but we can't tell them that they're not Christian because that's what they believe. Because you believe you're Christian.
Okay, but this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just like in cripping has a certain doctrine that's not left open for interpretation. It has a certain doctrine, as you agreed to, where if a person is not doing A, B, or C, then he's not a Crip. We can read in the text that's not, I'm not saying every text, because I will give you this. There are some things that can be left open for interpretation. But there are also certain things that are not left open for interpretation in the Bible. So if we see people, the white man, European, and what they did to us in America, if we see a doctrine in Christianity that's not left open for interpretation, but we see them not following that doctrine. How can we not question them on if they're Christians or not? Because they're not following the doctrine.
Well, you can question them. I'm not saying you can't question them. You just can't tell them that they're not what they are. You can question.
Okay, so change that. If they're not following the doctrine, why can't we not tell them they're who they are in the same way that you can tell a person he's not cripping because he's not following the doctrine? Why can't I tell a person who believes they're Christian that they're not Christian because they're not following the doctrine?
That's two different. That's two different instances, right? So you talk about a Bible, a book that was composed and canonated over millions of years. You talk about many people had many interpretations about the Bible. Stuff was taken in, stuff was taken out, and then they've been edited many times. So as human beings, every human being has the right to be what they want to be, regardless of how we see or what we believe. I get what you're saying, Jay. What you're saying makes sense. What I'm saying is still, even with what you're saying, you can't negate or diminish what people feel they want to be, regardless of how wrong it is. Because we know everything, we know that stuff in the Bible is wrong written anyway. So yes, I would say there's an issue with how they practice the religion, but I can't tell you that you're not Christian because that's what they profess with their mouth. And that's what they profess throughout history. We know that. But I know what you're saying. I mean, it's hard to really answer the question, man. Like, you really can't get around it because it's their interpretation. It's subjective. It's not really objective to really answer that because that's what they prefer.
I get what I get what you're saying too. I get where you're coming from. Jerome, I got a question for you. For the people in Africa who grandfathers grew up believing the Ifa tradition, and their parents grew up believing the Ifa tradition, and they were raised in the Ifa household, but they converted to Christianity, and they never lived over here in the West. So for them to have known Ifa their whole life and still to convert to Christianity, how would you feel about that?
Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I feel like if that's the case, then they made the decision to follow Christ on their own volition.
All right.
You know what I'm saying? It had nothing to do with colonization or some type of coercion for them to become a Christian. They did it on their own merit. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I feel. You know that, and that's how everybody should feel about instance like that.
Right. Okay. And I only asked you that question because as a Christian as myself, I know we like to get told that we only believe in Christianity because we live in the West and that Christianity was forced on us. And that we should look into our African ancestors' religion and to practice those religions. But we also see people from that continent who has never ever left that continent who still believe in Christianity. Christianity is booming in Africa right now, and the majority of people in Africa grew up not believing in Christianity and still converted to it. So if I could ask you another question, because I asked Jamal 2 questions and I want to make it seem fair. When it comes to Christianity, is there a doctrine that's not left open for interpretation, but people deny it so that they could follow what they think rather than to submit to the doctrine?
That's good.
That is a good question. I think that a good example, aside from what we already discussed, is I would say the people take the spiritual gift of speaking in tongues, right? And I know you probably done heard this being discussed many times before, but people take the doctrine of speaking in tongues, or the not the doctrine, but the spiritual gift of speaking in tongues, and they make it into a doctrine that isn't necessarily biblical, because they'll tell you that they even go to the extreme to say that if you don't speak in tongues, you're going to hell or whatever. But that's not, that in and of itself is not biblical. It has no doctrinal basis. You know what I'm saying? Even though the gift of tongues is biblical, the gift of tongues is not a, it's not a, it's not at the top of the mountain when it comes to spiritual gifts or salvation. But people take the gift of tongues and make their own doctrine out of it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think I hope that's a good example.
Now, so that would be a yes for you. People could take the biblical doctrine and overlook it for what they personally feel. So that would be a yes overall.
Yeah, that's definitely a yes, and that's definitely why we need to. It's important for us to study scripture for ourselves.
Okay, and Bianca, if you don't mind, before I hand it back over to you, I just want to ask Jamal one yes or no question. Jamal, I know you have said several times that if the biblical text is left open, if it's open for people's personal interpretation, I just want to ask you, based off of the writer's intent of each book of the Bible, do you believe that there is an original interpretation for the Bible that people should follow rather than their personal interpretation of the Bible?
Personally, I would say no.
Okay.
And I'm saying no for this very reason. I'm saying that because I think the original intentions of the writers were written for a different time and serve its purpose. So of course, everything in life has to be, you know what I'm saying? It has to be flexible. So anytime you get a document that you have not written yourself, of course, you're going to have some type of questions about what you're reading, but it has to make sense to you. So everybody's experience is going to be completely different. You know what I'm talking about? It's all about what you trying to do. So I would say no. That is me, but I understand your question. I would say no.
If I could say, and this is my opinion, you said no, but in your explanation, it seems like you were saying yes, because it's just like if you was to write something in 2020, let's say Jamal wrote something in 2020. I don't care if somebody read it in 3030. They need to understand it from the context in which Jamal wrote it in 2020, right?
Even in a sense, but you still would never really understand it because you haven't sat down and talked to me.
I mean, I know that, but even though I've never talked to you, I need to get as close to the, as like if I could read writings from your mother that talked about you, from your sister, or from people who knew you, I need to get as much context about you so that when I read your book, I can understand the context that you're coming from. No matter, it don't matter if it's 2,000 years later, we still can understand where you were coming from because I can look up words. Let's say we use the word swag. You know, swag just means looking good. You may have used the word swag, but if I go look up swag in 2020, okay, it meant this. Okay, I got where Jamal was coming from. So that goes back to saying, even though somebody may be reading Jamal's book from 2020, they may be reading it in 3030, but they still can find out a way to get what you meant originally. Right?
Linguistically, but emotionally, you probably, because emotionally, I might be writing it from a different place. So you can understand my words. You can understand my energy or my emotion with the words. So it's deeper than just linguistic. I know what you're saying. I'm following. So I don't just, but emotionally, I put in my writing that you might not can't relate to because you wasn't in my emotional state at the time. So, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying too. Okay, Bianca, that's all I had, bro. I know y'all lit, bro. Y'all lit tonight.
Yeah, salute to both of my brothers. This the only thing I want to add. I just want to say this for clarification's sake. When it comes to this whole thing with regards to the oppressors, particularly those in the antebellum South who enslaved our ancestors and call themselves Christians, I do like to draw the line of demarcation between them and those abolitionists who call themselves Christians, right? But I think our brother brings up a good point that has to be examined, because we know for a fact that the Bible, as opposed to something like the example our brother gave with regards to being a Crip who wears all red, can't Crip walk, wears everything to the right, and being in total opposition in his appearance, in his actions, in his skill set, being in total opposition to what he says he is, and somebody who believes in the Bible. And the reason I say that is the Bible, more than any other book, has been subject to the whims of those who read it. The Bible has been subject to the interpretation of those who read it. In other words, no other book in the history of the world has been taken and splintered off into so many different sects of the same belief. At their core, they all believe the same thing about the doctrine, but you have these little idiosyncrasies, and then in some cases you have very big gaps in what's believed and what's not believed. And I don't think you have that in any other text. And so while I love my brother analogy with regards to a Crip who wears all red and doesn't have the traditional skill sets of a Crip, etc., when we're talking about the Bible, it's clear through history that that book is different. And excuse me, the Christian faith is different in that people have taken it and used their own personal analysis thereof and splintered off into whatever sect they decided to create and follow. And again, same core belief, but for whatever reason, you have little different idiosyncratic differences, or you have wide gaps in differences. And a clear example of that is the whole conflict between Nefertiti and the urban apologists, with her being a Seventh-day Adventist and them saying, no, that's a heresy. But you have doctrines therein where they feel the same about some things, but then at their core, there are those differences amongst the two groups. And so I think that we can all admit that it's not hard to imagine these antebellum South slave owners taking the book and using it, flipping some of these verses, using the fact that Jesus didn't speak on slavery himself, and saying Jesus, the Lord didn't mention slavery, so we're not doing nothing wrong. Going back into Deuteronomy and these other books, and it's teaching on slavery and using those things to flip it and use them as examples of why what they were doing was justified, because clearly there were other Christians who were in opposition of what they was doing, and they used the Bible to point out to them that they was wrong, while they were in turn using the Bible to point out to what they were doing was justified. So when we talk about the Bible, it's a whole nother ball game with regards to how people can manipulate and use that particular text. And I'm sure we all can agree on that. I'm gonna let everybody give their opinion on that before I let the two brothers close out.
Okay, since I'm not in a debate, let me give my opinion first, if y'all don't mind. When it comes to what happened in slavery in America, as you said, and the people who were using the scriptures to show that the people who were having slaves were wrong, they were using the entire Bible. When we look at the slave masters who were trying to justify slavery through the Bible, they were using what we know as the slave Bible, in which the slave Bible had scriptures taken out. And the reason why they took those scriptures out of the Bible was so that they could justify what they were doing. Because if you read the scriptures in totality, there is no way that they could have justified what they were doing, because the scriptures totally speaks against chattel slavery. Now, when we look at slavery in the Bible, let's not forget, you can ask any historian on earth, what the Hebrews practiced as slavery, that was considered the closest thing to servitude than any other slavery practice on earth up until that time. So that shows that people say that Egypt is older than the Hebrews, which is true. Well, if the scholars are saying that what Hebrews practiced was closer to servitude than any other slavery that existed before that time, then that means that Kemet was practicing chattel slavery, and it wasn't until the Bible came along or the Hebrews came along to show what indentured servitude was. So we can't act as if, oh, when slavery was practiced in Africa, it was indentured servitude, but the Bible is speaking on chattel slavery, when the scholars actually say it's the other way around. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say that when it comes to the slavery that the slave masters practiced and tried to justify, they did it using only half the Bible, when the people who were speaking against slavery did it using the entire 66 books that we classify as the canon. And there's no getting around, and there's no getting around that.
Now hold on, man, because you know if you come at Kemet,
hey, let's go.
Look, man, you already know. Now we got to go ahead and
let's go.
This ain't even supposed to be about us. Nobody. This ain't supposed to be about us.
Hey, let's do another show then, bro. Let's go and let the brothers have their show. We'll do a
no,
dialogue on this.
I got to. Come on now.
Okay, I'm with it.
So first of all, there was no chattel slavery in Kemet. You would have to show me that.
I'm willing to show it. I'm willing to show it.
Outside of prisoners of war, you can't show me no chattel slavery in Kemet.
I'm willing to show you. Okay, I'm willing to show you all day that until the Israelites came on the scene, every slavery before that was not considered indentured servitude. I'm willing to show it. I'm willing to prove it. Not just show it. I'm willing to prove it.
So we laying down the challenge. That my brother is saying that the only time there was no servitude, there was no system of servitude before the Hebrews came along.
I'm not saying that.
That concept.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is,
it wasn't documented.
No. Listen what I'm saying. According to historians, the Israelites practiced what was considered indentured servitude, and before then, there was nothing considered indentured servitude before then. Not that there wasn't servitude. I'm not saying nobody was in service. That was way before the Hebrews. What I'm saying is the type of slavery that was considered indentured servitude, the Hebrew Israelites are the people who invented that before any other nation, and I'm willing to debate that.
That's fine. I don't care about the Hebrews. What I'm asking is, are we saying that there was chattel slavery in Kemet? Is that what? Are we saying that?
Oh yeah. I'm willing to say that. Yeah, I'll say that.
So that's what I need you to show.
Okay. Well, okay. I mean, I don't now specifically. I will say this. I go look for it. Now I don't know if I can specifically show that it was just in Kemet, but what I can show is that indentured servitude wasn't a thing until the Hebrew Israelites came on the scene.
Okay, that's fine, because I'm not saying that it was dubbed indentured servitude. What I'm saying is that there was that chattel slavery, as in like what our ancestors heard.
Oh no. Now that's not what I'm
saying in Kemet.
Now that's not what that's definitely not what I'm saying, because I do know for a fact, all historians agree, the type of slavery that our people went through in America there was nothing like that on earth until that time. So no, I'm not willing to debate that.
Okay,
Yeah.
now we clear, because
Yeah.
I got.
Oh yeah, oh no, you ain't gonna put me in no corner. I already know how I go. That's why I specifically laid it down as saying what we consider today and what we know as indentured servitude, that was created by the Israelites. I can prove that. That's what I'm talking about.
Hey, I'm glad we clear. Okay. And for the record, for everybody watching, because I know the bros gonna be watching, I put the challenge out there. I said, anybody that wants to smoke with Kemet, have at thee, and nobody did, for the record. So my brother said he's tired of everybody coming at the Bible. I personally said, I know somebody got some critiques for Kemet, have at thee, and nobody did. I ain't saying nobody's scared. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah, no. Now you already know me, bro. I'm not finna just jump in no debate that I'm not well rounded on. And I've said probably in the first video I've ever did on your channel, I know some things about Kemet. I'm not an expert in it. Now, I'm willing to debate Kemet, but only on the stuff that I know, not on no stuff that I don't know. So I'm not gonna jump in that ring.
No doubt. No doubt. I'm gonna have to edit all this stuff out. All right, my brother Jamal, I've been letting Jerome go first all night, man. So I'm gonna let you close out first.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity for this platform. We're here to again empower our people. We're here to work together about ideology differences. And it was a really great conversation. I've learned some things that I may not know. I'm cool with that. And I had a good time, man. I appreciate it, man. And we're going to keep it moving.
A lot of background noise. Hold on.
Hold up, that's probably me. Hold up. Let me go on mute. That's probably me.
All right. Yeah, man. So this one.
Let's start that from the TOP.
Oh, cool.
All right, brother Jamal. Hold on, real quick. All right, brother Jamal, go ahead and close out.
All right, man. I just want to say thank you, man, to everybody on the platform, man. It was great having this dialogue. There's a lot that I've learned. There's some things I still want to look at more deeply to learn about more that I don't know. But like I said, the purpose is to continue to build on this platform to do what we need to do for our people. And I'm grateful for this opportunity, man. I thank you, Pete, for what you do. I thank the panel. Thank you all for showing up, helping us dive in deeper than what we need to be doing. And like I said, I had a good time. It was cool. And we're going to do this again soon. You dig what I mean? One love.
No doubt. I appreciate you coming on, man. Like I say, I always say you was my inaugural guest, so we got to keep it going. Yeah, brother Jerome, the conscious Christian, go ahead and close out for me.
All right. I want to say that, as always, it was an honor to be a part of Paradigm Shift TV once again. You know, the discussion with Jamal, as anticipated, was it was very interesting, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, of course, we come from divergent views on certain things, but you know, it's all love, you know, because we done been in the trenches together. You know what I'm saying? On a couple of occasions. So, you know, even though we have different ideologies, you know, we both pretty much want the same goal for our people. So
that's peace. And I want to say thank you to both brothers for participating in what I consider a powerful dialogue. Kept it peaceful, got turned up. And I also want to say and thank you to my brother Nobody from Trust and Believe the Gospel, who gave me the idea to open it up for the back and forth, which got it turned up and made it a lot more interesting. Not that the first part wasn't a good back and forth, but I think it got even more edifying once we was able to open it up and get things going back and forth. It definitely got turned up. So I got to shout my brother out for throwing that out there. But other than that, again, it's been another powerful outing, another powerful show, and we'll be back at it again. Got some good debates coming up, good dialogues coming up. We got an abortion debate with me and my brother Nobody for Trust and Believe the Gospel. We got to see if we can outdo the two powerful sisters who had their debate. That'll be moderated by the conscious Christian himself. So, you know, same questions. We just gonna come to it from a king's perspective. We already got the queen's perspective. And then that question that came up earlier, me and my brother Jamal gonna be examining Satan or Hasatan as he's called as well. So got some good things coming up for the people. Remember, this ain't about entertainment, it's about edutainment, it's about edifying. So we'll be back at it again. This has been Paradigm Shift TV 314. The Conscious Christian Jerome Green, the Pan-African Jamal Wilkerson. And always welcome our brother Nobody from Trust and Believe the Gospel. We'll see y'all on the other side. That's peace.
Dabo.
That's peace.